Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my voice is audible and I'm visible as well.
Shri, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, just a minute.
Good afternoon, I'm Shri Prakash. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry about the video. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe I'll just use the mic. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Stakeholder Consultation on Sustainable Urban Mobility. It is very exciting that all of us have gathered here today to attend this meeting. So we will begin the consultation with a round of presentation from SwitchON Foundation. I would request Abhishek, if you can please change the slides for me. Yeah, so this is the agenda that we wish to follow for the meeting. We have an esteemed group of guests from different backgrounds, and we have arranged presentations likewise on covering different aspects of sustainable urban mobility in Kolkata as well as in other metropolitan cities of India. Next slide, please. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the global context of urban mobility which we have. That is, transportation is the single largest polluter in the world. So it almost attributes to about a quarter of direct CO2 emissions, especially from fuel combustion. 68% of the world population will be dependent on urban commute by 2050. Globally, if we see the revenue from ride-hailing and taxi services are expected to show a steep hike with an annual growth rate of 10.4%. China is, in fact, on the rise, followed by India and other Asian countries. The world has 53.3 years left to find an alternative to oil before the current proved reserves run dry, making it more relevant to shift to renewable energy sources for transportation and fuel combustion. Globally, electrification of public transport has started coming to the forefront. There are many cities who have taken a couple of initiatives in favor of sustainable mobility. Like United Kingdom has banned the sale of new gasoline and diesel cars by 2030. New York has invested $750 million to build charging stations and EV safe infrastructure. Seattle, for example, has 100% electric mobility fleet by 2030, which is the plan. And 10% in India, if we see, then the Indian electric bus market will account for 10% of the world e-bus market in 2025, which is greater than Europe and North America combined. And if we see globally, the sales of battery electric mobility and plug-in hybrid electric cars are tipping, which makes it more relevant to shift to a sustainable mobility pattern, especially for the Asian countries. Indian cities are also expected to contribute the largest, up to 89% of CO2 emissions from urban sectors. And also the growth in Indian vehicles has become 3 times more from 2004 to 2011. This growth rate is more than the population growth rate. India is also expected to emerge as the world's third largest passenger vehicle market by 2021. If the number of cyclists were tripled, then the rate of motorist bicyclist accidents would be cut in half. So also 50% of the people in India use non-motorized forms of transport because distances traveled are less. And 1.7 million Indians have died due to air pollution in 2019, which has been recently released by the Lancet Planetary Health Commission report, which says that most of the pollution is from outdoor air pollution. Yeah, next slide. So what other cities are doing in favor of sustainable mobility are London has in fact created a 450 kilometer of new cycleways by 2024. European Union has given 13 cities of European Union have joined to start integrated cycling plans in a project called Shivita's Handshake. Berlin, for example, 43% of Berlin does not have car and they prefer riding cycles. Paris is also spending £20 million to encourage people to opt for cycle mobility.
Hi. So I'll take it from here. Thank you, Shri. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll talk more about the state of urban mobility in Calcutta itself. So whoever is from Calcutta and who have visited Calcutta, they all know how great our public transport system is. It's considered one of the most cheap, affordable mean of public transport, and it tops the list of 20 cities which has the most affordable public transport system. Also, Kolkata has received, West Bengal has received the Bloomberg Award for in the category of green mobility, and the state claims that by 2030 we'll deploy 5,000 electric buses in West Bengal, and we also have a great network of local railway. And every day, 3.5 million people travel in local trains. We have 6 main lines and 19 branch lines, which operates on a daily basis on 1,500 services. So that's huge. Plus, we have the oldest operating metro corridor, and it started in 1984. And we have also started our east-west metro. Now we are operating on the north-south domain. We'll be operating our east-west metro soon, like the full-fledged. We also have the longest waterway. We are blessed with Hooghly River, so we take advantage of it and have the longest waterway in India. And World Bank has also committed to start a project of amounting to USD 105 million to improve the inland waterways in Bengal itself. Plus, we have the oldest operating tram network in Asia, and it has been in service since 1900s, electric transport. Also, if we look at the average speed of Calcutta, it varies from 14 to 18 kilometers, which can be easily matched by any cycle or any non-motorist transport. So that is one thing we should keep in mind before making our policies. And we have 1.5% road accidents which happen due to cyclists, and 71% of this is the fault of motor vehicle as opposed to what the common notion is. Also, our Howrah is one of the most polluted city in India, where 91% of the days have air quality which ranges from poor to severe, while as opposed to 87% of the league. So 37% of this population can be accredited to vehicular emissions. So now we know how harmful vehicular emissions can be. So recently, Kolkata is the only city where sustainable mean of transport like cycle is banned. And during the COVID period, it had relieved the ban, but again, it's Kolkata police has given the issue a warrant saying that 62 streets in Calcutta will have cycle restrictions. And the main two concerns which were raised was that interruption in movement of vehicular traffic by cycles, and that cycle threatens to safe movement of vehicular movement, which we already saw is not the case. So I'll hand over the next set of slides to Vinuta for the presentation.
Very good afternoon, everyone. So what we also did as a build up to this stakeholder consultation was a congestion survey that we had done in 2013. We repeated that again this year, and also a perception survey. So very quick results from these two surveys that we did. So the congestion survey that we did was spread over across Kolkata, north and south equally, in 8 major intersection points across Kolkata. And what came out and what we did really there was we took 3 time slots, and this was spread over a month, about 2.5 months. We had our team members there who with cameras and tripods monitored and physically counted all the vehicles and all categories of vehicles that were passing through these main intersection points. And what came out, cars and taxis, I hope I'm audible now. Cars and taxis take about 40%, took 40% of the were the vehicles. About 40% were cars and traffic. But over the years, and I'm going to talk about that in my next slide also, there's a very large increase that happened. Cycles, to our surprise, was 7%. Also because of the restrictions were relaxed. Buses were about 12%. Unfortunately, trams is now almost negligible, especially also because of Cyclone Amphan. There was a lot of destruction that happened to the tram lines. But systematically, a lot of trams have been reduced in the city. Only very few tram services are currently working. The next slide is very interesting, where we compare the result to what the exact same survey that we did in 2013 in the same intersections. Everything was the same. What comes out as a surprise, or even to some it may not be a surprise, there was a 300% increase in private vehicles and taxis both, and about 800% increase in two-wheelers. This is something really to be mindful of as we move ahead and as we keep the discussion moving. What was really nice to see was that there was a lot more cycles as compared to 2013. There were 900% more cycles. A couple of reasons behind this was, in 2013, there were about 174 roads that had restrictions on cycles. Right now it's 60. Vehicles that were there were cycles. There were certain intersections which saw huge number of vehicle increase between 500 to 800%. There was, and also when we talk about cycles, it was mostly in South Kolkata that the cycle numbers had increased. In North Kolkata, the cycle numbers have hugely decreased. And also from what we did was we also undertook a perception survey. In the perception survey, we just wanted to understand from commuters on roads of Kolkata. We walked up, we spoke to about a little less than 500 such commuters and asked them about their situation, about the traffic and how they look at the traffic situation in Kolkata. So here the commuters said that 41% of them travel by public transport, bus, especially bus. Of course, within public transport, 41% commute by bus, which we know Kolkata, there are a lot of short distance travel that happen. A lot of public transport is used in Kolkata. There's very good, very positive culture that exists in Kolkata that was again reinstated through this survey. A lot of short distance travel, 80% of these surveyed commuters said that they were traveling less than 10 kilometers. 39% said the travel time between home to office space was less than half an hour, which is a luxury in metropolitan cities in India, or big metropolis in India. But also 66% of the commuters said that there was scope for improvement in the way traffic is. And there is, of course, everyone who's been to Kolkata recognizes that Kolkata police does a fantastic job in managing flow of traffic, but there is a lot of traffic. There's a lot more vehicles on the road right now, which is leading to pain point for a lot of people that we have. what was really interesting, this was a survey that we asked. So there are, as all of you know, 62%, and probably the only city in the world, I would say, I don't know any other city in the world that has cycling restrictions. So from the map that you saw, almost all of Kolkata has cycling restrictions. So about 95% of Kolkatans said that that cycles should be allowed on streets, and 89% felt that cycle lanes should be built. Of course, New Town, which is a satellite town of city of Kolkata, that has cycle lanes now, but Kolkata still does not have any cycle lanes. But 89% people surveyed felt that cycle lanes need to be built. So this was just we just wanted to set the context for this. Also, what was interesting was that one of the reasons why cycles are not allowed on Kolkata lanes is because they're considered unsafe. When we asked the commuters, they said they felt most unsafe because of trucks, and about 80% felt they felt unsafe because of trucks, 65% because of auto rickshaws. They can be pretty rash, and 80% because of motorcycles, and which has seen about 700% increase over the last 7-8 years. Only 26% felt cycles were unsafe for city roads, for others on city roads, and for themselves, they felt unsafe because of cycles. So this was just we just wanted to set some context before asking some very experts. We're we're honored to have experts such as everyone that you've seen on the list. I'll go one by one and introduce them. I'd like to first, since we are at the conversation about cycles, the first theme I'd be happy to talk about is the need for promoting non-motorized transport, not just because of climate change, but also for congestion issues. So I'd like to call upon Dr. Geetam Tiwari, who's from IIT Delhi. She needs no introduction. She's an inspiration for everyone who works on cycles. So Dr. Tiwari, if would like to call on you, if you could please join us and share your valuable.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vinay. Thank you very much for those kind words. And it's really nice to be present in this interesting discussion. So as basically your instructions said that I have only 4 or 5 slides. That is just to lay down the context. Well, context you have already laid down, but let me just share with you. And I'm going to focus, I thought let's focus on small cities. So let me just share my screen. One moment. You have to allow the sharing of the screen.
Yes, ma'am. You're just being made co-host right now. Right, ma'am. I believe you can share your screen now.
Yes. So I guess you all can see my screen now.
Yes, ma'am. We can see your screen.
Yeah. So, of course, you talked about Calcutta and in fact, any city in India, I think bicycling is very, very important. But for small cities, it's even more interesting because, we have had so many discussions, so many meetings and studies on mega cities. And lately, we have started having some studies on medium-sized cities as it is shown here. We have a large number of small cities, and we hardly have any studies understanding that. So in these small cities, just like any other big city also, you see the dominance of how people commute to work is really by walking, bicycling, and walking and bicycling is the 2 most dominant mode. And then it is followed by buses, and the range goes from 40 to 15%. So a large number of people are walking and bicycling. And if now we looked at, specifically 5 small cities, just to get an understanding of the travel patterns also. So again, you see the gray one is showing, the gray color shows the use of bicycles. And actually bicycle and two-wheeler is very similar in these cities. And these are cities in Punjab, cities in Rajasthan, cities in UP, in Haryana. So this is very, very common in a lot of our North Indian cities. Are they traveling long distances? The answer is no, actually. In small cities, And interestingly, we kept making this point for big cities, but of course in small cities it makes perfect sense that majority people do not travel long distances. So if you see here also, between 2 to 5 kilometer is the largest proportion of travel to work. And this is really an ideal bicycle distance. So, so two things come out. Number one, lots of people are bicycling. And number two, that given our city structure, mixed land use patterns and high densities, compactness, the trip lengths are rather short. But there is, I think some of you mentioned in your earlier slides also the issue of safety. So we've looked at in several cities in details, but let's see the two small cities that we have, Bulandshahr in UP and Patiala in Punjab. So here we find that in terms of victims, of course, it's pedestrians, motorized two-wheelers, and then it's bicyclists. They are the majority of the victims. And in Patiala, you find more bicyclists as victims. So what we learn is that pedestrian, bicycle, and motorized two-wheelers face the highest risk on our roads. And the impacting vehicle usually happens to be trucks. A lot of times, actually, for bicycle and pedestrians, it's unknown. These are hit and run crashes, which we don't know what was the impacting vehicle. But trucks and buses are involved, and we were surprised to find actually the number of fatal crashes which are happening because of where the motorized two-wheeler is an impacting vehicle. So this is an important aspect to understand. Okay, so what we learn then about from small cities is walking, bicycling, and public transport is used by people actually who do not have other modes as a choice. So on one hand, we can feel very happy that a lot of people are using bicycles and walking, but these are not choice users. And I think that is why today's discussion is very important, because this is where we have to discuss that, how do we make, there are large number of potential users, because the trip lengths are short. These are very much bicycling distances. And why are these people not bicycling? So if safety is one of the issue, then we have to address this. And how do we address it? We find that, in your survey, plus in many other surveys also it's come out, that the existing infrastructure that is there for pedestrians and bicycles, and I would say even for public transport users, is very hostile. We really haven't done anything specific to make it more comfortable and safe for people walking and bicycling. So, and of course, benefits you have already talked about. Those are the same benefits. We need bicycle infrastructure. It can reduce pollution. It can very easily reduce dependence on motorized transport. In fact, if I can bring out this point that in these our cities, and especially medium and small cities, in the name of public transport, mostly we have intermediate public transport. And why that happens? Because if we tried running these full buses there, the trip lengths are so short that we will never get enough demand. And therefore, we would be running those systems under capacity. The load factor would be very low. So that is why these kind of small vehicles, which are our intermediate public transport vehicles, they become more viable. And of course, they are more polluting. So we have to see that these 2 to 5 kilometer distances, they are easily bicyclable distances. And in the absence of investment in infrastructure and any effort towards creating this infrastructure, we are losing out on this. So not just congestion problem, but also dependence on motorized, any type of motorized vehicle becomes less if we are able to encourage, provide bicycle infrastructure. And of course, bicycling, because people are able to go a little bit further away comfortably other than walking. So it expands your employment opportunities, which is again very important for a large number of our, for people living in small and big cities both. Three things I would like to flag here for discussion also, because you also mentioned, your surveys about congestion. I think this is really a big issue we have to understand, because authorities are everywhere really concerned about congestion, and sometimes even experts and even people who believe in sustainable transport start, finding congestion as a major issue. But just think over it. The moment we say congestion, that means we are actually flagging the issue that motorists are facing. How many times are we saying that congestion is faced by public transport users or bicycles or pedestrians? So this is, I think maybe when we do next time our own congestion survey, we have to find out, are bicyclists facing congestion or not? If cars are facing congestion, I think then the strategy should be that you carve out space and let some people bicycle. Because as the history tells us, we have enough empirical information to show the more space we create for cars, more cars come on the road. And actually the same logic has to be used for encouraging bicycles. That if we start investing in bicycle infrastructure, even where we have places where we have few bicyclists, the better infrastructure itself starts creating the demand for bicycling. So infrastructure is not the only factor which induces demand, but it's one of the very important factor which induces demand. And the other two important factors already exist in our cities. We have dense cities, we have mixed land use patterns, we have short trip lengths. So this is an important aspect that we have to work on. Then the second important aspect that we have to again for discussion, that creating bicycle infrastructure does not mean a separate lane all the time. There is a clear logic. We have to create a network, and a network consists of a combination of segregated lanes, painted lanes, and low speed and ensuring speeds which are low. So combination of this, so where we have narrow streets, we just have to ensure that motorized vehicles are not able to go at a higher speed, higher than 20 kilometers by design. And other places we can paint to give them right of way. And only on arterial roads where our motorized vehicles are moving at 50 kilometers per hour, we need a segregated lane. So this is also a myth I find sometimes, that people start thinking, that we always have to create a separate lane. So I would stop here, and let's bring out these points in discussions, that why we are not able to do it. Because what I just said is not any new understanding. I mean, many of us have understood and discussed it for several years. So let's, I think it's important to understand what are the challenges, why we are not able to do it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There's no better way to kickstart the discussion with these thoughts that you leave us with. I'd like to now invite Mr. Venugopal. Venugopal is from ITDP. Everyone knows of ITDP's great work, and especially the inspirational work from Cycles for Change Challenge. So that really sort of started to really energize cities to start talking about cycles. So Venugopal, would love to hear from you about your experience with cities under the program.
Thank you so much, Vinay, for the introduction, and it was great to hear about the findings from the surveys that you had earlier conducted on, and to hear Dr. Geetam Tiwari. I'll just share my screen. Do let me know once it's visible.
Yes, we can see your screen. Thanks.
Yeah. So life, as we know, is certainly back on the streets in all our cities as restrictions are coming up, and like some of the speakers earlier said, motor vehicles are also coming back. And even before COVID, the concerns of like what Dr. Geetam Tiwari rightly said, that the infrastructure for walking, cycling, and public transportation has been hostile to the users in many ways, that we've seen a declining ridership over the years. Congestion as a result of people shifting to private motor vehicles has been witnessed. Some of the Indian cities top the charts, like some of the stats shown earlier as well by Vijay. And COVID sort of fueled this further for the fear of using, congested spaces in public transportation. And there has been a small jump again more recently in the surge of private motor vehicles. I think, Vinay, in your presentation, as well as Dr. Geetam Tiwari, very well summed up the point of why cities should embrace cycling at this moment itself. And it is with that very same intent that the India Cycles for Change Challenge was launched by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the Smart Cities Mission in July last year. This was launched at a time when, like some of the examples that were shown earlier by Shreya, where cities across the world were testing and implementing initiatives to make streets safer for the people to walk and cycle. Adding on to some of the examples that were shown of Paris, Milan, and others, this was in Oakland, where 120 plus kilometers of slow streets were done in a few weeks. We had cities like Bogota who set up, pop-up cycle lanes and later looked at ways to make it permanent as well. And cities like New York, which had the open streets programs, which sort of, spread like a pandemic itself in many open streets coming in different parts of the country. And this was a good relief for the people at that point, and this has sustained and become resilient as a time went by. And even Indian cities at that point of time started seeing a surge in cycling. We had, like some of the pictures on the right from Chennai, Bangalore, Kurukshetra, and Mumbai. Citizens themselves were sort of organically coming onto the streets to reclaim the spaces for themselves, to play, spend time with their families. The cycle sales have a boom, and I'm sure that the majority of you on this call, either yourself would have started cycling in the last few months, or you might know of friends and relatives and colleagues who would have picked up cycling. And so that has been the boom of cycling, and it's still something which is still shooting up, and there is a shortage of demand for cycles, for example, in Bangalore, Chennai, city where I'm in right now, etc. So tapping into this momentum was when the Cycles for Change challenge came to be, where the intent was to create safe and quick cycling solutions on the ground through community participation. And this being relatively a new space for most Indian cities on how to provide good infrastructure for cyclists, it was important that the cities learn through these quick testing methods and then look at making them long-term as well. So broadly speaking, the aims of the challenge, like Dr. Geetam Tiwari rightly said, first and foremost, it's the infrastructure that needs to be there. For any new habit to come, you need the right environment. So infrastructure to make it more safe is a critical piece that cities should look at. Along with that, you need other factors which play a crucial role as well. For example, ensuring access to cycles for all. In many cities, they don't have access to good cycles as an option. So you look at rental schemes, you look at bicycle sharing schemes, or subsidies are also avenues that can be looked at. Engaging community in this process through different events and activities to make them part of the process, and to in turn break the stigma around cycling, because all of us know for a fact that if a city has a lot of recreational cyclists who go for rallies and cyclothons, they normally stay as recreational cyclists, and often they don't switch to the category of people who commute for errands or for work. And that switch is, which is very critical as well. So how do we facilitate for that? How do we change the stigma that you don't look down upon cycling as an activity which is done by some people who probably economically lower cross section? So that stigma is changing in Indian cities, but how can cities support further in that transition? So for this, the approach of the challenge, before I get into some of the updates of the cities itself, like I said, was to look at a test, learn, scale approach, where be it a campaign to break the stigma around cycling, be it a community engagement exercise, online or offline, or quick interventions on the ground, through pilot testing. The idea was to test it on the ground, to do that testing with the community, to learn from it what worked, what didn't work, to refine it, and then look at scaling it up across the city. And this learning component as well, through this challenge of around 107 cities, the learning has been cross-cutting between the cities where they share their learnings with each other, and I'll come to that in the slides to follow. So very broadly put, the challenge was broken for clarity for the cities into two parts. The first part, stage one, is what is ongoing right now till January 31st, where cities need to test a pilot on the ground, and they need to develop a proposal on what their learnings are and how they can scale this up, and also set up some institutional processes in place so that there is resilience in the long run. And based on their performance in this stage one, cities would be shortlisted and they would move to stage two. And even the other cities will continue to receive guidance so that they can transition into stage two as a cyclic process. With this intent came the question of what should cities do in these pilots. So as I spoke earlier, this being a relatively new space for many cities, it was crucial for the cities to test and learn from the different spaces that they would implement on the ground. For example, one mandatory requirement was that the cities should create cycling safe corridors. Cycling safe corridors would mean segregated cycle tracks, or a cycling highway or a greenway. But at the same time, as the previous speaker rightly said, in all cases, it does not require to have a segregated corridor. For example, in neighborhood areas, all that is required is to probably cycle through the area, understand what the difficulties are, and cater to fix those challenges. By probably slowing down the traffic in a few streets might fix the concerns. Probably you might need to reroute the traffic in an area. You can have car-free stretches in a particular zone. Probably it's about improving lighting and safety, which people perceive as a concern. So different tools could be used to make even neighborhoods and corridors safer than just providing cycle tracks. And an integral component of the first and second is that of intersections, which in the surveys, many surveys that were done across the country by the cities, came up as one of the most crucial challenges that cyclists face alongside cycling along with fast-moving traffic, on how they can cross intersections safely. So to test and learn from doing designing and implementing safe intersections was also a crucial component. To sum it up, like I said, it's a corridor and a neighborhood that cities were working towards. There were benchmarks set in terms of to have a continuous network, like the previous speaker stressed upon, that it should be a continuous stretch where you could test probably a smaller segment, but look at scaling it up across. Additionally, were the other activities like training camps, repair clinics, cycle rental schemes, and sharing schemes, which the cities could do as well, which would sort of build the environment entirely for people to switch to this particular mode. So 107 cities have been part of this challenge so far, and they've been at different stages of progress. And I'll take you through some of the updates so far. So starting in the mid of July, it was a phase where cities primarily had to use online tools for communications with the citizens of what is happening. So they started with branding approaches of creating their own logos, posters, putting it out there that the city has signed up for this challenge, and that we are looking forward to your support to work with you to make the city more safer for cycling. So these are some posters from cities like Jaipur, Agartala, Chandigarh, Gwalior, Kohima. They used different platforms to reach out to the people so that they could sign up to support their city as well. So we had around 2,000 plus interested CSOs, civil society organizations, apart from 2,000 more individuals who signed up to support a particular city in their own caliber that they could. In some way, it was to volunteer for on-ground work. In some situations, it was through helping in the design process. In some cases, it was through funding. So different individuals and CSOs came in with their own skill sets and they signed up. And the cities, the core team of each city formed a group of their own, consisting of these different individuals, and they've been working with them towards translating all the work onto the ground. So some of the images that you see in these slides and to follow are from different cities, for example, Gopal, Kohima, Agartala, and others, where along with these teams, which were a diverse team, the cities went on to do different kinds of events. And by events, on one side, it was online and offline consultation sessions with, for example, women, children, different user groups to understand their concerns and needs, what could be done. On the other side, it was frequent campaigns of cycling on the ground, which also helped people get onto cycles and to pick up that habit and make it as a long-term habit, shifting from recreational cycling into commuting to errands and work as well. Again, a few photos from Nagpur and other cities of their initiatives that they started with. Another crucial piece closer to the Independence Day was a campaign that was launched called the Independence Cycle for Freedom campaign, where templates were shared from our side to the cities where they could seek stories from different users in their city on what they felt towards cycling and share that online. So we had an overflow of stories that came in on social media. And this again was a strong tool to break that stigma to some extent of what people saw towards cycling and to push more people into. And it also showed that there were a lot of different age groups and user groups and categories of people from across the country who sort of connected with cycling itself. Another key component that the cities rolled out was surveys, perception surveys, and also on-ground surveys to understand their sites where they will be testing. So on the left is the perception surveys of 54 cities who rolled out the perception surveys and around 60,000 plus responses that came in, which was primarily anchored around to understand what the challenges were for the cyclists in their cities, what they would hope the cities would provide them for to make it more safer for cycling. And the on-ground surveys were more anchored to a specific site, an area, to understand the challenges in that area to cater for the design solutions in that area. So for that, what we call as the handlebar surveys were conducted. Very simply put, it was basically cities calling forth a different group of stakeholders and saying that this is the area that we are looking to make safe for cycling as a pilot test. Let's cycle through this area, understand what the challenges are. Let's cycle through at different times of the day, peak hour, non-peak hour, different days of the week. Let's understand what the difficulties are. Let's come back to a design desk and then see how we can, prioritize the concerns and look at wrapping it up.
Venugopal, sorry, can I ask you to wrap it up quickly?
Yes. So some insights about the cities who have done the surveys, and this is a rough numbers of cities who have selected corridors and neighborhoods for testing. And in the coming slides, I'm just showing some images of the testing before I wrap up. So the city names are mentioned below: Pimpri Chinchwad, Nagpur, Faridabad, who have done their pilots and are learning from. This is Delhi. Aurangabad, Jabalpur, Nashik, and others who have started testing on the ground, and more importantly, doing studies to learn from the testing as well, and sharing that learning on different platforms so that the cities can, incorporate those learnings for the new cities who are testing it. So Kakinada, Bangalore, Chennai, and alongside this, there have been campaigns happening parallelly to keep the momentum going, bike repair clinics, training camps, etc. And to sum it up, along with guidelines and templates that as knowledge partners, we and other experts have been sharing, the cities themselves have been using the WhatsApp and email groups to ask doubts to each other and clarify it, and that peer learning has been an integral component. So to sum it up, for long-term resilience, apart from the pilot interventions and initiatives to build support, cities are also working towards setting up institutional processes in place, like an EPEX committee and an NMT cell, and even looking at long-term pieces like an NMT policy, which will help them chart the vision ahead. So 6 months down the line, we have many cities who have sparked this momentum for a transformation, but it's certainly a long way to go. And we look forward to Kolkata as well to join this change, because like when I said, the New Town Kolkata has been an active participant in this challenge and has done considerable on-ground change. So looking forward to the discussion. Over to you, Vinay.
Thank you so much. And this is such an incredible campaign and such inspiring photos. Congratulations to you and everyone from the community for everything that has happened. I'd like to now invite Shri Shantanu Patra, who's who's the superintendent engineer of KMDA, Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority. He's been leading the discussion on the Cycle for Change campaign in Kolkata. I would love to hear from you, Shantanu ji.
Thank you, SwitchON, for giving me this opportunity. I just want to share.
So you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, yes.
So we
have also contacted. Yes, we have also contacted traffic survey regarding the cycle and other vehicles also.
So you may have to double click that PPT again, please. We can't see your presentation yet. What we understand is KMDA has created a committee which also has the police to promote cycling and to see how cycling can be made, cycle and NMT can be made part of the transport. So I'd love to hear from you, sir.
Yes, yes. Are you able to see this screen?
Not yet, sir. You may have to double click that presentation once again. We're not able to see it, but it's fine. Even without the presentation, if you can start, and then we'll be happy to circulate your presentation later.
Okay then. We have conducted TVC survey and mid-section of roads, CTVC survey also, cycle user survey, stakeholder survey, road inventory survey, and topographic survey. Actually, we have conducted topographic survey in EM bypass. That's a good result. Total 13% of volume increases from 3.5% in the COVID situation. So there is a huge amount cyclian has used. 80% of cycle users' income is a socio-economic survey we have also done. 80% of cycle users' income less than 30,000 per month. 80% of people use a cycle for work purpose at the different sectors. And major threats to the bicyclists is buses and auto drivers erratically, lack of road space for cycling, high traffic and congestion on roads. Also, there is a problem for parking cycles, on-street parking cycles. It will be better to present these slides, but we have planned also. It's a huge positive side. Kolkata city is east to west is only 5 kilometers. So everyone can go where and there within 2 to 5 kilometers. We have also planned bicycle lanes at the edge of the roads, around 2 meters. Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, yes. So we have planned this design at the edge of the road for 2 meter width, and you have seen that in Kolkata, car parking is using this area for car parking. So we may use that area. This is our basic model, and we have a committee where Kolkata police is also there, and we have conducted meetings to introduce this cycle track down the city. Okay, this is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're so happy to see and hear that
Yes.
Kolkata is considering cycle as a key transport. Just to ask a question, sir, with the committee, what if you
Yes.
if you could kindly share what has the progress been since the committee has come in place, and what are maybe some issues that you see with promoting cyclings, and what are the positives about it? So if you could share something with all of us, please.
Yes, I share you. We have planned to introduce cycle track around 120 kilometer around our city. It is a east-west corridor and north-south corridor. I told you earlier that in east-west is only 5 kilometers. So they can move easily from any point to any point in Kolkata city.
This is absolutely music to my ears. This is great to hear. And also, as the previous speaker said, that the lanes are probably required more for the arterial roads within, and the other roads which are the neighborhood roads. We hope cycles can be promoted. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all the efforts you're taking with promoting cycles in Kolkata. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, now I would like to invite Shri Prakash, sir. Shri Prakash ji is a mentor and distinguished fellow with Terry, and would love to hear from you, sir, on the need for promotion of safe, non-motorized transport. Prakash, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jaju. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. In fact, I must at the outset express my gratitude to be here this afternoon. Happy living memories in Calcutta in early 70s and late 90s, and I found to be very livable. And since I'm from the north, it was welcome to me that it is so friendly. A lot of pedestrian walk to be there. In fact, I also used to walk a lot. The people used to use this cycling, and the number of the private vehicles have been used to be much less. In fact, the seeing.
So your voice is not very clear.
Any presentation.
Prakash sir, your voice is not very clear. There seems to be an internet issue at your end. Should we come back to you later, or if you?
Just a minute, we'll leave and then rejoin.
Sure. We'll come back to you later. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Shri Vijay Anadkat. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname right, sir. He's a senior fellow with the WRI in urban transport. Would love to hear from you on mobility infrastructure that we've spoken about, and also transportation planning for cities. Shri Vijay.
Yeah. So, thank you, Vinay, and good afternoon, everyone. Like so that, it's like my great pleasure to be here, and particularly when it's like so that the topic which is from the heart of my lecture. So, let me first say why this like we really require urbanization. What we are talking about, that and we are earning about like say the total 70 to 75% from the urban area. The total GDP comes there, and what we are clearly spending the lesser than 1 to 2% in the like say that. And if we see the like say the very small component of this urban transport goes for this like say. So the what we are like say really spending in the cities is the like say also very less, and out of it there is the like say urban transport component, the least one. And even if in that case, if we see that like say the focusing on the like say that basic, that is what is the basic like say development of NMT, is negligible. It's just like that the corporate councillors grant for anything in that. So now we really need to do lot in this direction, and that is why what we are like say the facing today. And it's not like say what to mention here, that the cities are like say having the impact of air pollution, road accident, and problem of like say the parking spaces, and it's increasing day by day. Like say my other like say the colleagues and speakers like say talk about, so I will not discuss much. But like say that the still, if you like say discuss within the municipal corporation council, because I work for the like say that as the chief engineer transport municipal corporation about 25 years, and even if you say that it's like say about NMT, what is NMT, then they like say that they confuse whether walking, cycling, cycle rickshaw or not, or like say that how it can be done. And even in the definition we are like a little bit confused. But now like say that it's a very good thing that like say the from the MOA side, from the ministry side, that like say they are understanding from this JNNRM era to now, even like say in the smart city and Amrut mission, and a little bit ahead of that, we are like say focusing on the like say that. I also congratulate the MOA and like say the ITDP to take the like say the this like challenges which like say the encourage people to
Meeting
so, and then that is why but like say what see there is a like say big gap even like say in the 2006 the first like say NUTP made, and where there it was saying that the construction of bicycle lanes, pedestrian path, the construction of the like say that pedestrian crossing at busy intersection, it also saying the formulation and implementation of the pilot project for NMT. These were the like say wordings. This is outright from this urban transport policy, and what really we are there like say that it's a very like say there is a little gap in between that like say even if you see the funding pattern, you will not find what during the like JNNRM, the like say little 12 cities came with the like say NMT land along with the BRTS corridor, because it was not specially there. And this was the like say that some like say state also initiative, some Ragiri days or NMT initiative, the Fit India, cities for cycle. These all the things happens, but in the peace. It's not, nothing is happening in the like say that. Still after the like say the 70-75 years, we are moving in the pilots. The pilots is not a solution. We have to do the holistic like say way to go there. And that is why what I say that we have to now like so move from the conventional planning, where the movement of vehicles is rather than like say the people is like say we have to identify that, and we have to focus on that like say that how we can do that. There is no doubt we have like say the problem of the like say safety and security for pedestrian, and it's increasing. So how we can do in the best way, whether the like say that the each the like say part require the separate lane, maybe the like say bus corridor especially, maybe like the footpath for that, maybe like that. But we have to identify that like say that how we can do that. We are like say that doing the everything in the like say peace field. Why we are not preparing the like say the city cycle path? Why we are not making the plan for the NMT for the whole city? We are like say doing the like say that in the NMT facility, what like say really we are missing, and like say that often we say who will do that. The argument like say when I was like say discussing with the like say that people in the like say government, what they were saying, there see there is the like say the concept the chicken egg theory, whether we have to first develop the NMT infrastructure or like say first we have to do the cycling, and then we have to come with that. Some people were saying that we have the like say lack of fund, and then my argument was that like say if you can spend the 300 crores for a single kilometer of the metro, why cannot like say do for the 300 crores for the whole of the city? So it's like say not like say the argue which is really require to be encouraged, but like say the people will argue because the like say that this is the simplest work, and that is why they are finding the toughest one. Like say that to make the NMT is not like say that very rocket science, but because it's easier, so people are not doing that. So and then second, they say there is the like say that how much we can do the equitable allocation for the road space. You are asking for the footpath, you are asking for the NMT, you are asking for the like say cycle track, and where we can do that. We also like say that concern about that our like weather. We always arguing that our weather will not permit to walk or cycling. We are like so that in the 42-degree, how can do that? I say for the last 3 years, I am using the cycle for every time to go to job and that. So one cannot, why cannot one? Because like say I am resides in the Gandhi Nagar, that is the hottest one even. Like say the 45-degree. So why one cannot? But this is the argument, and the people are doing that. So what we really require to do, this is the first and foremost thing, is that to improve the safety and convenience of the pedestrian the cyclist, like so then how we can do in the best way. The second very important thing is that to irrespective of the characteristics of the width and the street, or like say that we should promote them. That like say that our priority we have to change. Our priority is the like say the car owner is the like say our first priority, and the like say the walker is the like say least one. But like say if we see the like say that total the allocation, then we see who is the like the real user. I share my own experience because we are not like say discussing with the like say the people. This is the public consultation meeting. I'm first time like say attending somewhere, and where the people are like say able to say there. See in the like say Rajkot, when we were like say preparing the BRT corridor, I say let's do like say two kind of the things. One is the like say traditional footpath that is adjoining to your like say the property line, and another is the continuous footpath. I made the like say the 100-meter stretch and show the people, and people were happy to choose the like say that continuous like say footpath. They say this is the best one. We can like say they do in, and we are using that. Even one can like say see and witness this. They like completed the whole continuous process is there. So the while the designing the footpath, we like if you like say convince the people, then people will happily adopt that. Similarly, like say that whatever they want to do for the NMT development, they can do that. The like say it should be like say free from any obstacles and barriers. It will like say really allow them to do that in the best way. The very important thing when we are like say designing there, we are like say making mistakes, and we are not developing anything which like say give them safety and security, like treatment such as the like say traffic calming measures we really require to like say put in the place. If we really do high quality user friendly like say that shaded somewhere, even like say I tried a little bit about the 200 meters of the like say page where the like say solar panel can be put for the like say that covering the footpath, which is like say it helps to generate the electricity simultaneously to constrain to retain the vehicle not to enter in this part. So that like say that how we can like say take the very innovative things and like say integration with the like say that our public transport is must, because like say that who is the real user of the public transport and the like say cycle. One study says the more than 75% people who are like say using the public transport, I come in like say normally coming by walk or cycle. So that is we have to see that, and only that like say in isolation method it won't work. Like say it should be like say in the like say best way, and we should start from there. For example, in Gandhi Nagar, that like say that instead of putting the cycle costing 50,000 rupees, like say we encourage them to like say do the cycle of the 5,000 rupees, but you can have the like say the number of cycles. So that today there are the 3,000 cycles, and that is the from the CSR fund. corporate social responsibility fund. We don't require the very high-fi kind of the like say the infrastructure for development. That there is the like say that the people are managing this like say that how to maintain this cycle in the best way. So people are using that. Earlier that was the like say the cycle is where the in the range of 12%. Now it is increased to 16% because this the cycle is available and your range is there. But like say that you have to like say give the people to opportunity to do that. And like say you have to continue like say make some efforts for this. Otherwise, like say in the like say if you do some drive and like you forgot, it won't work. We have the like say experience of this Swachh Bharat mission. Just like say we started, then we forgot like say, wherever the survection came, it's like say we were no. It's not like say the correct way to do that. We have to do that like say for the longer lasting and like say that it. And lastly, I want to just summarize that we did lot of pilots. The like say walkable cities are safe, healthy, and vibrant. We believe that. In that case, even this like say it's evident during this COVID-19 that we can like say we are like say ready to use that. We should take this opportunity, and then we can like say that encourage the cities to come with the like say that the NMT holistic plan. It's not a like say the single meter plan or like say 10 kilometers plan. If you like say that Kolkata is having the 3,000 kilometers, the like say that very usable road, we have to plan for 3,000 kilometers the NMT. Then only it works. Otherwise not. What we have to do, we should not use the like say the copy paste. We should like have the approach like say really we do for like say that customize for the like say Kolkata. If Kolkata has the solution, which is not a solution for Ahmedabad, or Ahmedabad has a solution, it's not like say work for Kolkata. And then we have to start from anywhere. We can't start with the like say the 100% perfection. We should start like say that with the passing mark. I say that if you get the 35 marks, that's fine. You should start and then you reach to the like say distinction. But what we are doing, like say we are waiting for that, and that is why we are not like say, able to complete that. Lastly, I am like say very thankful to the SwitchON and the organization for this wonderful webinar and like say giving me an opportunity. Like say, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, and especially like the part about equitable road space that you made so well. Thank you so much. We have Prakash ji back with us. Prakash ji, I'm really happy that you had a good time in Kolkata, and it's a very livable city. Would love to hear further as what you were sharing.
Okay, sorry, very sorry about this internet issues, which is very common apparently at my residence. Anyway, I hope that now there should not be any interruptions. Yeah, I was, in fact, I have very happy memories. That is what I'm talking about. And the one thing which I would like to mention that Kolkata, in fact, I lived in Calcutta, so is not designed for the systems which are being followed now. It is designed for the mass transport system and pedestrian, walking, as well as the cycling. And then the Calcutta has got the most varied form. I mean, all kinds of the modes are there. And then you talk about the suburban railways and metro railways now, and metro railways came in the early 80s itself. It became operational in Calcutta, though it took a very long time for the construction. And secondly, even the old tramways, you know, which are still there in Calcutta, and rather very, in fact, the tram network has been curtailed, but wherever it is being used very well. And as I mentioned, you know that see, it is not designed that way, which now the cars and these two-wheelers have gone up in last 10 years particularly. Even up to the 2011 census shows that a large number of people traveled either to the work, either by walking or by using the cycle. And even this ownership of the cycles also went up in the first 10 years of this millennium. And last 10 years, you know that with the increase and very rapid increase in the motor vehicles and also the facilities that have been increased for easing the and reducing the congestion rather, but that has eased more motorized travel and rather made it difficult for the people to do the cycling. And because why this city is made like this is that and that is why the road network road width, etc., is very limited in the city, and that is why we have the congestions. And one thing which I noticed during my occasional visits to the city is that now it is almost impossible for walking because of the encroachments on the pavements, and even the people have to be they are forced to walk on the roads as well. So this is one thing. And then second thing which I noticed was that we have the plenty of the when motor vehicles parked on the roads, which again limit the road space. So these are all these things, you know, and if we want to solve these problems, in fact, we have to go back to the old system, you know, where these non-motorized transport were supplementing the mass transport systems. And we have to strengthen all those systems. And what we have to do is, like, say, for example, there was an attempt to increase the metro network in the city, and of course it is taking longer time than it was envisaged. And even this east-west metro has started working only partially. But we should strengthen the system, metro system. More metro system should come up in the city. And secondly, even this suburban railway systems, you know, the suburban railway systems also, there are expansion plans which are languishing, maybe because of the financial constraints or land, etc. All these things you have to be strengthened. And you know that this Kolkata has got a ring that is a circular railway system. Now, circular railway system, which when it came in the 80s, it started easing the road congestion, etc. But somehow this has not been still fully utilized. And if it is upgraded and then brought to the same standard as the suburban railways, then will be possible to bring the people from the outlying suburban areas to the city, to the main city, even to the BBD Bagh and Paliganj straight. So this will again reduce the congestion. So there are a number of the issues which can be solved. And one thing which I notice that only the Kolkata can do, because not other cities are using that much, is the use of the river, the riverine transport. The riverine transport, you know, the ferries and barges, etc. Still, I think there is a lot of things which are to be done there, expanding these services. And these waterways, which is rather boon to this city, should be strengthened. So these are the things which I thought that will be very, very good in, apart from these increasing the cycling, you know, that what my previous speakers have mentioned, you know, that, and in fact, it is very rather heartening that some of the steps have been already taken by the government for introducing the cycling, etc., cycle lanes, etc. But more infrastructure should be there for, say, including some space for the hawkers, which are needed for the city, but at least they should be given some separate space where they can put their things, and then at least these pavements are strengthened for the walking, etc. Even this, as has been already mentioned, that once you say that pedestrians are important, or even the cyclists are important on the roads, and they are given more space, rather preference instead of these motor vehicles. That itself will bring a lot of change, because that will create confidence in the people in cycling and the walking. All these things, that in fact, in the short, if you go back to the old methods which the city has done, and instead of building the more flyovers, etc., and trying to ease the issues of the motor vehicles, etc., rather we should solve the problems of the cycling as well as of the people who are walking.
This point, I would request everyone to make some comments in the chat box. We'll come back at the end of the session with maybe a few questions and comments. But after moving from this section to the other section where we talk about electric mobility, which we all truly believe is the future, especially given that there will be a rise in car ownership in India, we like it or not. And currently India has 18 cars per 1,000 people compared to America, which has 786 cars per 1,000 people. So, and the pollution that we know already that exists in India, we have no choice but to look at electric mobility. And of course, we're running out of fossil fuel. So to kick that, the other section, I'd like to call and invite Dr. Shruti Narayan, who's the regional director of C40 cities. I'm very proud to say that Kolkata is part of the C40 network. So, ma'am, Dr. Narayan, would love to hear from you on the role of electric mobility that can play, especially in public transport.
Thank you so much for this invitation, and it's been absolutely riveting to hear the discussion around pedestrianization and sort of the introduction of NMTs and cycling. So, and it's also wonderful to see Kolkata, that is a C40 city, to sort of take this initiative and have the stakeholder consultation. Because we are structuring the new business, plan and leadership standards, and we are very interested in engaging further with Kolkata to see how we can actually really look at transportation as being one of the key strategies for Kolkata. So, in the interest of time and also having some internet issues, I'm not going to share a presentation because I feel like a lot of ground has been covered in sort of laying the course of why what is mobility all about and how to sort of look at it. I mean, I'm just going to introduce sort of a couple of key areas that I think one should look at the context of electric vehicles. So it's obviously important, and I'm very glad that we had a discussion around pedestrianization before, because normally when we start looking at the discussions around electric vehicles, or one looks at it in isolation. So I think the first thing is to not look at it in isolation, because just shifting fleet or any kind of transportation to electric doesn't really resolve an issue in of mobility in a city. So at C40 we have sort of adopted a four-prong approach when we look at mobility, and we say it's number one is avoid. So how does what kind of help do cities need that can avoid journeys and through doing a compact and connected planning. And that is really important. We have several examples of cities that are now looking at 15-minute cities or 20-minute cities, which as a concept translates into how an urban planning exercise could be undertaken. And and if you look at this Dr. Geetam Tiwari's presentation was very interesting when she brought up the example of small cities. And I think small cities, travel less is because they already have very compact and connected planning, in the sense that, they can just walk down and buy bread. They have access to, grocery, to clinic, to, basic facilities for a day-to-day thing. And, even for work. So, I mean, of course, if you're going far off to a job place further along to next city, that becomes different. But I think it's very important, and I think India had it, but I think we're losing that in some way, where we are kind of shifting into more of a suburban mindset of looking at planning, where we are widening roads and actually reducing the connectivity or the feeling of intimacy, or the way we look at cities with respect to a human scale. So it's very important. Number one is to avoid the journeys. The second is how to shift those journeys to low carbon modes, right? So the discussion that we had in panel one, which is looking at how do we facilitate walking as number one, right? So low carbon walking is the best. So how do you look at walking? How do you look at cycling and other NMTs to shift these journeys to that? So people look at using their cars even less. The third is improving the efficiency of public and private fleets. And that also comes with another discussion that was happening around last mile connectivity. And that's very critical, because while we are introducing, the metros and other sort of BRTs, we kind of forget how a significant, population is actually traveling and taking these, coming to the station, because they end up, I mean, I live in Delhi, and I've seen that, while DMRC is very successful, and I'm actually very proud that it's got a very good network, but last mile connectivity is a challenge. Even for me, sometimes when I was working at IFC before I joined C40, and my office was in Aero City. So while I could get to the metro both ways, from my house to the metro, from getting to the office, was a challenge, and that would a lot of times make me think of not using the metro. So I think last mile connectivity is also very critical, which could be addressed by prioritizing NMTs, or giving bicycle parking priorities in some of these areas, and also having a lot of cities are looking at rentable models. I know that the DMRC has tried it. I know in Bangalore they've been looking at electric scooters as rentable scooters, which was doing very well. So kind of looking at what could be the modes of improving the efficiency of public and private fleets. And then the last is adapting and making sure the transport infrastructure is resilient and it meets the need of changing climate. So this is the kind of sort of strategy we follow at C40 when we look at mobility. So it's important to sort of bring that as a basis. And of course, for us, it's very, we are very supportive of electric vehicles. And, we recently had, our city finance facility was working with Bangalore, to look at how they can actually develop a plan to transition into, of sort of having about 1,000 buses converted into electric buses, and we help them in project structuring. And I mean, the impacts of why electric vehicles are, better or could become better are already well established. There are several studies, so I'm not going to say anything that's, that people in this panel with, haven't heard of. But our work has established, and our studies in Bangalore and in general, research has established that electric vehicles can really sort of help in improving the air quality of the city. They can really help in managing the climate change, the carbon emissions. In addition, we also saw that there was a reduction in noise pollution, right? So, of course, it also depends on the technology that's chosen, but depending on the chosen technology, one has also seen the reduction in noise pollution. And that's another issue that cities should look at, right? With the amount of cars that we have on the streets and the horns, constant honking, it's really has an increase on noise pollution and severely impacts old people and hearing. So that's an important way to look at electric vehicles. And we've also done a calculation which I'm happy to share with anyone on the life cycle cost analysis, and we were able to establish that it pays back fairly quickly, for BMTC, and the shift was very imminent and well structured. Also, one of the things that was brought up by Mr. Vijay Anadkat was very interesting on how does one evaluate the investment, right? So if you're not looking at complex infrastructure projects and something simple, if you just look at it in terms of payback or the capex opex, it sometimes doesn't make sense, right? But what we are increasingly trying to tell cities and when we are making infrastructure investment decisions is also looking at the soft costs, or like how do you sort of monetize the cost of health in cities and avoided accidents or public health and livability. And if you look at all of those aspects and you can try and monetize those economically, some of the infrastructure decisions start making sort of more sense. We have declarations. Mumbai has just signed up to become a C40 city. We are actually really planning to ramp up our work on transportation in the 5 cities that are a part of C40 in India. I would actually encourage, one of the things that C40 is, we like to do is to have stakeholder consultation and work together in collaboration. So if you're interested and you're keen to, partner with us on any of the aspects of mobility, we'll be very interested to hear from you and, and partner. And I'll just pause here for the next person to speak on electric vehicles. And if there are any further questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Narayan. And I especially really like the point which you made that we can't look at electric vehicle in isolation. So very true. I'd now like to invite Srimati Aditi Mitra Ghosh. Aditi ji is she's a consultant with the Department of Environment, Government of West Bengal. I'd love to hear from her on the experience of deployment of electric buses in Kolkata. Sorry, she's with the Department of Transport. Aditi ji, you're probably in mute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Ji, we can hear you.
Yeah, can I share my screen?
Yes, ma'am, please. We'll just make you a co-host. Yes, you're a co-host now, ma'am.
Okay. How do I do full screen? Okay. Yeah, all of you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for your kind introduction and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be part of all of you today and take you through the journey of introducing and deploying electric buses in Calcutta. The buses are running for about more than a year now. The project was initiated by Department of Environment, Government of West Bengal. They first carried out a feasibility study on the whether these buses are viable or not. And after the report, the project was implemented by West Bengal Transport Corporation. They are under the Transport Department of Government of West Bengal. And I'm very fortunate to be part of this entire journey. So in first, starting with preparation of the techno-economic feasibility report in terms of payback period, what could be the potential routes for their operation, etc. And following the viability of the report, the transport department decided to actually go ahead, and I worked with them in terms of deciding on the specifications, preparation of tender document, evaluation, and finally the procurement. So as you all know, West Bengal Transport Corporation, they manage the public transport in and around Calcutta. They operate more than 1,000 buses in the KMA area and peak hours. The average daily ticket sales is about 50 lakhs of rupees, excluding Saturday and Sunday. Length of buses, there are mostly two types of buses, and one is of little shorter length of 8.5 meters and the other at 12 meters. And the cost of right now I'm talking about diesel buses, so the cost varies from locally made to company manufactured, and they range between 40 to 90 lakhs, and the seating capacity varying between 35 to 75. Challenges for operating electric buses, I'm sure most of you all know that there are few disadvantages. They are more expensive than conventional buses. There is a limitation on the range, how much the bus will travel per charge, then lack of charging infrastructure. Even charging takes a lot of time. So compared to diesel buses, it's much higher refueling time. Not recently, in the last 1 or 2 years, fast charging options have been made available, but they're much more expensive compared to the slow chargers. And the time taken for fast chargers for a typical electric bus is about 2 hours, whereas for slow chargers, it's 5 to 6 hours. And also the battery capacity varies, and the more higher capacity we go, which of course offer a higher range, higher kilometer the buses can travel, but the cost of buses also, the cost of battery and the cost of buses also increase exponentially. So we have to do it judiciously. And there are the advantages we all know. There is no requirement of fossil fuel, and also the efficiency is much higher. Oh, I'm sorry. For battery technology, the batteries are, the most expensive component of an electric bus. They cost about 50% of the total cost. Because batteries are mostly imported, there's a lot of R&D work is going on in the country for indigenous manufacturing, but still right now we are importing all the batteries. The battery prices have fallen down more than 40% in the last 5-6 years. And also the fast charging batteries are in place. So these are the positive developments. Now, normally for batteries, the life is about 5,000 cycles. So if we charge the battery twice, that is, suppose a bus makes 2 round trips from depot to depot, that is, the life becomes 2,500 cycles, which is about 6 to 7 years. And these batteries are very high end. So after usage in the buses, they still have some residual life left, and they can be used for applications in other sectors, for example, in inverters, where the requirement of the energy requirement is not so high. Now for EVs, the fuel is the electricity, and in Calcutta, CESC has this tariff for municipal and non-municipal bodies, which is separate from other industrial or residential tariff, which is currently about 7 rupees per kilowatt hour. And they also have TOD, prepaid tariff. So the nighttime tariff is about 6.08 rupees per kilowatt hour. And the electric buses can take advantage of this nighttime tariff because they can be charged throughout the night instead of the, I mean, in addition to the, if any charging happens between their round trips. So this nighttime lower tariff becomes financially favorable for the project. It reduces the energy cost as well as the payback period. Now, we all know about the FAME program of Government of India, which is for faster adoption of electric vehicles. So for the Calcutta project, I collaborated with the Department of Industry, Heavy Industry, and Ministry of Industry for if FAME subsidy could be given for this project in Calcutta. So this program, under this program, it aims at incentivizing all vehicle segments, not only buses, but two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and passenger four-wheelers as well. And they have a special program where they provide subsidy to state transport undertakings for procuring electric buses. Now for the techno-economic feasibility study, we had to identify the potential routes. This I did in consultation with the transportation department, and a few parameters were undertaken and considered. So firstly, the regenerative braking systems of electric buses. No. Hello, am I clear? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry because my internet showed unstable situation. So the stop and go condition in Calcutta's roads, they were favorable for the regenerative braking systems of electric buses. So we purposely chose congested routes. Also, we chose routes where the trip length ranges between 80 to 100 kilometers because we didn't want to go for very heavy duty battery, which would have made the buses very expensive. So we wanted to remain within the optimum range of 100 to 150 kilometers run per recharge, and we chose the routes accordingly. Also, we chose routes where the bus depots have rooftop space because 2 to 3 years back, when we were doing this study, we hoped that in the future there should be option for solar charging for the batteries. And currently the department is thinking in those lines, and they are going to install some of the some solar charging in some of the depots. So we had chosen the routes according, because in Calcutta, all the depots are not very big, and sometimes buses are lined up on the roads at night. So we had to choose, where proper depots are available with proper buildings and enough rooftop space. They were found technically feasible for operation in Calcutta. And financially, the payback period came to be 5 to 9 years because we had chosen about 10 routes. So for different routes, it varied from 5 to 9 years without FAME subsidy. And considering FAME subsidy, the payback period was coming to as 3 to 6 years, which was pretty acceptable. So following the feasibility report, the West Bengal Transport Corporation, Department of Environment, and the Department of Finance, they agreed to procure 20 buses from the own state budget in September 2017. Meanwhile, I was collaborating with the Department of Industry for FAME incentives. And in October, DHI, they invited many Indian states for applying for the FAME incentive, and we submitted an application for procuring 100 electric buses, and they approved subsidy for procuring 40 buses, and they also supported for procuring the charging facilities. So it was decided that 40 air-conditioned electric buses would be procured, 20 each of 9 meter and 12 meter, and 15 slow charging and 5 fast charging stations would be procured. So accordingly, the specifications were finalized. We held a pre-bid meeting with all the potential manufacturers, and the tender documents were, I prepared the documents with help of, in collaboration with WBTC, and announced in January 2018. And the following 8 manufacturers submitted the bids. After evaluating the technical bids, 4 bidders technically qualified for 9 meters and 4 bidders qualified for the 12 meter category of buses, and they were not common. Only 2 bidders were common for both of these categories. And after opening the financial bids, the lowest quote was from Tata Motors in both the categories, and they were awarded the project. And as per the contract, they had to show the first prototype in 4 months' time for inspection. And after the approval, they had to supply 40 e-buses after 2 months of that. So,
may I request you to...
yeah, so the total financial involvement came to about rupees 36.78 crores, out of which 60% subsidy was given by DHI and the balance came from the State Plan Fund grant. And after this, after the tender was announced and finalized, DHI offered another 60% subsidy to WBTC for procuring another 40 buses. So in all, 80 buses were ordered to Tata Motors, because DHI was left with surplus money and many states didn't apply for any such scheme. So the buses the Tata Motors started supplying the buses in 2019. It was inaugurated by the Honorable CM, and also Mr. Aditi was the Transport Minister at that time. And this is how the buses look like. And these are the routes where the buses are playing. This is the trip length. And for the charging, it's a dual board port, so which can work as both slow and fast chargers in 6 and 2 hours. The battery capacity is about 130 kilowatt hour for 9 meter buses. So 2 batteries for 9 meter and 3 batteries for 12 meter buses. The life is 6 to 7 years and the range is about 100 kilometers per charge. So if we see the capital cost compared to diesel buses is much more. And also the cost of charging units are, additional, about 10% than the cost of the bus. And the fuel cost obviously is much lower in case of electric vehicle. And of course, the annual expenditure is also much lower compared to the diesel buses. And that is it from my side, and thank you.
Thank you so much. And all of those details, I was listening with so much attention to all of those details. It was fantastic to hear. It was such a learning experience. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Shri Amit Bhatt, who's the Director of Integrated Transport at WRI. Amit ji, would love to hear from you on learnings from different states on electric vehicles that West Bengal and East India or Kolkata for that matter can adopt.
Thanks a lot, Vinay. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you and your presentation is visible as well. Thank you.
Perfect. No, I think we've had some discussion before also in this deliberation around looking at opportunities for electrification. And while yes, definitely, I think the priority should be on promoting walking and cycling in cities. But even with that, there will be some amount of, hopefully some amount, and not a large amount of motor vehicles. So the question then becomes how, or should at all we kind of electrify them? And I'm sure how does one go about doing it, right? So we talked about a lot of gains that will come from zero emission vehicle. better air quality. We can also mitigate some of the GHG emission. We can use this to promote renewable energy. There has been talks about energy security, so on and so forth. But I'm saying even if those arguments are not kind of inspire people to go for electrification, I think this one slide should definitely do, because vehicular exhaust is a major health hazard. And we are looking at all kinds of diseases coming on because of a high level of vehicle exhaust. And therefore, the question then becomes, one, should we go about it? Yes. And then how should we go about it? I think that's the big question. Because when we talk about electrification of transport, immediately an image like this comes to our mind. That yes, everybody talks about fancy electric cars. People read about fancy electric cars. There's a lot of money which is coming in this sector. But then the question then becomes, is this the vehicle for electrification, especially for India? And more so for a city like Kolkata. And that is something which we have to think a little more, because that may not be the case. So the reason why I'm saying that may not be the case is that if you look at the overall composition of fleets which are sold across the country, we are looking at a vehicular fleet which is 72% two-wheelers. And then add another 16-18% to that. That's a 98% of vehicles which are either two-wheelers, or they are public transport, or they are goods vehicle, or even in the car category, they are economy cars. So the image that I showed earlier is not a true representation of our vehicle fleet. In fact, that only represents a fraction of 2% of vehicles that are sold. And that's very unlike a developed country. So one, our vehicle fleet is different. That is something which we have to remember. Second is car is not the predominant mode of transport in our case. In fact, if you look at cities, a bulk of the trips are happening on walking, cycling, and public transport. And therefore, how do we electrify a vehicle segment which is largely shared in nature is something that one has to look at. So that's the other important bit, that walking and cycling are the predominant mode of transport. And within the motorized transport, we are looking at shared mobility, public transport as the predominant mode. The third important thing which you have to remember is the trip length. Now, trip length is nothing but an average trip a person makes in a city. And it's an average of people who are traveling a lot versus who are traveling less or not at all. Now, what you see is that 75% of our trips are less than 5 kilometers. So big cars, fancy cars with 200, 300, 400 kilometer range are really not the vehicle, because we are looking at vehicles which have shorter trip length, because that's the difference that Indian cities have from some of the Western counterparts, that our trip lengths are short. So that's another important. And only 16% of our trips have less than 10 kilometers as a trip length. So that is something also that we have to keep in mind. The other important thing we have to keep in mind is, one, what are the travel speeds? I mean, if you look at peak hour travel speeds, be it Kolkata, be it Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, these cities and bulk of our cities travel less than 20 kilometers per hour. And even if you look at smaller cities, the average would not be more than 25 kilometers per hour. So we travel at comparatively slower speeds than what you see speeds which are advertised, because those are advertised for highways. So that is something we have to keep in mind. And the other important thing we have to keep in mind with electric vehicle is our temperatures in summers exceed 40 odd degrees. And therefore, this would mean shorter battery life, frequent replacement, and increased cost of ownership. So with this thing, I think we can fairly kind of comfortably say that the electrification of transport in India has to be different from the way, let us say, North America is thinking about it, Europe has gone about it, or even the way China is looking at it. Because we have a very unique mobility mix, and we have a kind of a different topographical and climatic perspective as a country. Now, we looked at few state electric vehicle policy, looking at states like Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. We also looked at Delhi, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, and Punjab. And we saw that there is some level of similarity, but there are also level of differences which are there in these state EV policies that have gone ahead. So for example, a state like Karnataka is eyeing for a 25% electric mobility by 2030. Let us say, a state like Delhi, which is looking at 25% of all new registration by end of 2023 to be electric vehicle, along with 50% of public transport. So the states also have different priorities when it comes to electric vehicle. So what we did was actually we started mapping these states for various categories of electric vehicle policy and their policies, and we looked at one on the demand side as well as from the supply side, and some looking at some of the other policy, some of the other areas which are important. So, for example, Delhi is one of the most progressive policy when it comes to generating demand for electric vehicle, and they have given a huge amount of impetus looking at financial subsidies, kind of scrapping incentive, vehicle loan, and so on and so forth. To let us say a state like Karnataka, which may not have really a demand side, but they are looking more from the supply side initiative. So as I said, Karnataka looks at EV from a large amount of supply side, as well as looking at charging and energy infrastructure. And then if you look at Delhi, Delhi has put a huge amount of focus in kind of looking at how can they provide financial incentives on charging and make the charging of electric much more affordable and cost effective. And then, but on the manufacturing side, we see that Delhi has not done much, also because there is a certain restriction on what kind of industries can happen. But then if you look at a state like Tamil Nadu or even Uttar Pradesh, they have really focused electric vehicle more from the supply side, more from attracting industries, and more from the perspective of making these states as the EV hub so that they can meet the needs of the country as well as maybe in some of the regional aspect as well. And then we have also looked at some of the key enablers which these vehicles, these policies have come, depending on what kind of roadmap they are looking at, what kind of institutional structure they are creating, because a lot of it will happen if we have the right institutional structure in place. Again, what kind of ease of doing business, and so on and so forth. And that's where, looking at this, we realize that policies are definitely a great starting point, and a good progressive EV policy will catalyze a bigger change. But what we also know that policy alone will not do the change. This will require a complete ecosystem shift. We have to have vehicles, we have to have charging, energizing system, we need to have batteries, and then there are other many factors as well. And that's where I'll come to my last two slides. First, I think what we have to do is create some kind of a roadmap. And so in this guidance document, what we have done, we have created an electric vehicle roadmap. Let us say, if a state has a policy, how does it go about implementing that policy? And this is where I think Kolkata and West Bengal can take a huge learning from some of these efforts which have happened. One, select the right vehicle segment. So two-wheeler from personal mobility front is one such vehicle segment, but the other big vehicle segment is three-wheelers, taxis, and buses. So address the right vehicle segment. Second, create the right, first step is to create pilots. Do a successful pilot, and that's where a lot of effort and push will come from public agencies, the government side. Then you go into the kind of scaling phase, which is the effort on the government side will go down. A lot of private sector will come, take it forward. And then we go into self-propulsion mode, which is where the market will take care of its own, and the action will move forward. But I think, just to wrapping it up, we need, if electric mobility has to be a mainstream, then we have to look at all these four pillars, which will require a kind of ecosystem change, and that's where I think one should go about doing. And you can read more from this, the guidance document on electric mobility, which will give you more about how can one go about doing the roadmap. But happy to answer if any questions, and thanks a lot for the opportunity for talking to you.
Thank you so much, Amitji. This was, you packed in so much in such a short time. Thank you so much for this. I'd like to now invite Dr. Ratoola Kundu from TIS, from the Urban Policy and Governance Department, on lessons Kolkata can learn from other cities. Dr. Kundu, if I could ask you to wrap this up in maybe 5 minutes, please. Sorry about this.
Sure. I'm sorry, I think I got the brief wrong, but my presentation is mostly going to be on looking at, what can Kolkata learn from other cities, but mostly from the point of view of walking and cycling. I'm not an expert on EV, and I think my previous speakers sort of spoke much better. So if I can just move to the next slide. Yeah. So this is, chaotic Kolkata, street during Durga Puja, where you see, there have been sort of special police measures there to control the pedestrian traffic, but it's kind of flowing right outside, and, there's every chance of an accident happening, but people happily negotiating their way, wading their way through this. So one of the things that Calcutta poses is, the fact that the city is extremely dense. The fabric of it is accessible in many parts, but also over the years, what has happened is the city has grown, not so much at the core, but in the peripheries. And as a result of that, the work-home relationships, the spatial, the structural, the social relationships have kind of changed really over time. And, with the introduction of more and more private vehicles, the character of Calcutta, which used to be, so dependent on public vehicles, has been shifting now, also enabled by new infrastructures like flyovers, and, more overpasses and underpasses, metros, the costly kinds of infrastructures, which kind of are sort of disjointed from the pedestrian and the cycling experience that used to define the city historically. So just moving on to the next slide. If you can just, yeah. So this is a photo from Rajahat New Town, and it kind of, goes to show the kind of jugaad vehicles that kind of come up in the periphery where connectivity is still kind of poor. And I know some previous speakers mentioned that this is also an area where, cycling has come up as one of the cycle for city for cycling challenges. But, this is the reality of how many poor people live and work and move around in the peripheries. And still it's kind of very disconnected, disjointed, and it's kind of, a make do, an everyday reality experience of making do. So what can we do? So there is the good and there is the bad, and there is increasingly, a dissociation from what used to sort of define Kolkata as an affordable, livable city, which another sort of speaker sort of pointed out, and where are we going, right? And the gaps that we must really pay attention to. The next slide, please. This is a shot from one of my favorite cities in terms of walking around, not just as a tourist, but definitely from point of view of people who live in the city, who work in the city. This is Hanoi. What you see before you are people, residents, who are enjoying themselves on the city's streets. And this is a central part of the very congested Hanoi city. It shares many characteristics with Calcutta in terms of transportation, the weather, in terms of population, economic structure, the informal economy, and all of that. But here is a city which has taken this challenge up and sort of has created this, these days and nights in the evenings when the traffic is stopped over the weekend into its central core areas, and where they have many such public functions and activities which bring people to enjoying the central core and the heart of the city in very different ways. The next slide, please. Again, this is again Hanoi by day. What you see before you is again the core area of the city, where pedestrianization is focused on. There is a lot of focus on also, giving space, adequate space for three-wheelers and informal transport. Here you see the cycle rickshaws in a way, but you also see that the pavement space is kind of wide, and it's maintained in a way in which people who people eat on these pavements, people walk on these pavements, and people sort of enjoy the daily routines on these pavements. If you were to walk through central Hanoi on an everyday basis, it almost looks like the very congested parts of North Calcutta. But this is the way in which, not only have they maintained the pedestrian framework, the fabric of the city, but what they've also done is encouraged, different stakeholders to be part of this kind of city framework. And also this has encouraged tourism to a great extent, and the revenues that come from tourism into its most central part. So I'm just going to be talking about, some examples drawn from some of the cities that are there internationally. Apart from Hanoi, also there is Hoi An in Vietnam, which has a similar, a touristy sort of a very traditional core city center, which is pedestrianized completely during certain times of the day. And it sort of gives precedence to cyclists and rickshaws, informal modes of transport, and of course walking. Again, this is very, very favorable to not just tourists, but also the informal workers, the vendors, the women, who sell food on the streets. And it kind of gives this experience of having, everything that is accessible, but also kind of maintaining that old world charm, but also doing it in a way that's, of course, environmental friendly. So what are cities in Asia doing? And I'm going to focus on key interventions that are policy interventions. So for instance, Chennai, for example, in India has drafted a non-motorized transport policy, right? Which is to create footpaths along at least 80% of its streets, along with infrastructure such as cycle lanes, with the promise that they will begin prioritizing people over vehicles, right? So while we know that, like Amit just said, from the intent from policy, moving from policy to implementation, there might be a big gap and there might be a big sort of leap from there. But it's important to sort of really study what are these kinds of policy interventions that are happening in different states. Kyoto in Japan has oriented their 2010 sort of transport strategy entirely around walking and reducing car trips, increasing public transport use, and cutting emissions, right? Pune municipality, again in India, has sort of built in the walking footpath design into their urban street design guidelines. And it is using these guidelines to sort of transform the way pedestrian environments will be shaped. So the way in which, our master plans need to really think about how do you not only include budget provisions for making footpaths, for creating cycling infrastructure, for improving public transport, but also, in terms of the spatial planning, right down to the, the hierarchy of road network, and also down to the level of the local street area plans. How do we build in policies and shape designs in that manner, right? Of course, so moving from policy, the second sort of interventions are, the kind of design interventions and tactical urbanism that you see in different cities. So in India, there have been examples that are drawn from Pune, Chennai, and Mumbai. Also Delhi, I know, which have pedestrianized particular areas, chosen particular streets, and fully pedestrianized them. And using these kind of, and to sort of calm traffic, to enable people to, enjoy the kind of slower movement, make cities more accessible. This is something that is important to sort of understand. What are the pros and cons of doing these kind of design interventions? Like, who benefits from these design interventions and who is then negatively affected by also these design interventions? And what then, how do you incentivize people to sort of, sort of willfully sort of choose these kind of design interventions that will allow for more walking and cycling in the city? In China, in Guangzhou district, they've transformed, extremely dense mixed land use districts into excellent pedestrian networks, right? They've restricted vehicle access, created walking only streets, and they've encouraged a diversity of land use. This not only sort of, enables a better environment, but definitely, improves the social quality of life. Singapore again has covered walkways at pedestrian crossings, particularly looking at, public transit stops. And how do you sort of integrate those public transit stops with housing developments, especially low income public housing developments and it has this park connector network through, these are green pathways, which kind of build together, which kind of bring the greens as well as the gray infrastructure, meaning the transport infrastructure into an integrated kind of a structure. So therefore, Singapore also has something interesting, which is called the elderly friendly silver zones.
Dr. Kundu, if I may request you to wrap up.
Yes, yes. I'll just wrap up here. So the silver zones improve accessibility, provide safer crossings for older adults. So a design intervention that's meant particularly for a particular social group. However, I'd just like to point out that, all of these interventions are context specific, socioeconomic, city specific, remembering the kind of spatial urban patterns that exist there. And therefore, we need to keep in mind the, what are the governance questions as well. I did not hear much about that in terms of, who is making these decisions with respect to, do we bring in an electric bus system? Who sort of designs street furniture, who sort of decides to put up a murti in the middle of a public sort of footpath, who is in charge of sort of designing, cycle ways. And if you recall, in Calcutta, just 3 or 4 years back, there were very arbitrary decisions taken against cyclists. Although, the common speak was that, Calcutta is going to be transformed into London in many ways. So, how do we sort of look at these contradictory messages that keep coming at us in terms of the priorities, in terms of investment, but what is really happening on the ground? And so how do we build together this governance and political question in terms of how we redesign our cities for people over roads and over vehicles? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kundu. That was just for Indian cities. I'd like to now invite dear friend Vinuta Gopal. She's the CEO of ASAR. They do some fantastic work on air pollution, and no better way to wrap this discussion up. I'm aware that we've gone over the time already, but I'd like everyone to just hold on for another 5 minutes. Vinuta, if you can have the last one. I'm really sorry we could not take comments and questions, but this was otherwise just a very fulfilling experience for me. And I would also request everyone to maybe switch on their cameras at the end for a group photo, virtual group photo. Vinuta, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vinay. And I agree with you. It's been a incredible amount of rich inputs on the subject, both on thinking of mobility, the important things that we need to keep in mind, as well as on the electrification, and couldn't agree more with the points Amit made on that electrification needs to be consciously understood and applied in a way that makes sense for the country and for the particular city or state. So thanks so much. I really am not going to take very much time, and I don't think I really have much to add, given you know, all of the conversations that have happened and the information that we've all got. What I'd like to I think just reflect on is that you know, conversations like this, where we are actually getting this diverse sense of the issue, and where we're able to bring many more actors who should be involved in this conversation on board. I think part of I mean, just as important as the transition in the power sector is for India and in a climate change world, I guess the transition in transport is also equally important. And a lot of investment clearly has gone into enabling, you know, increasing the convenience of people who own motor vehicles, while really India is not necessarily moving only through motor vehicles. And so I think in many ways, we really have to bring to the forefront the need for the transition within the transport sector that enables mobility and is addressing the needs of the people much more than merely building infrastructure that's servicing a few. Having said that, the electric vehicle transition is, as you pointed out, Vinay, a transition that is underway. And India cannot, I mean, there are the increase in motor vehicles is happening, and the health impacts of that are severe. So we do need to address that transition as well. And it is an important one to think of and plan and make sure that it's happening in a way that's right for our country. I just wanted to put one point there, which we didn't necessarily speak about, but you know, the e-commerce or the segment of delivery services, we've seen a huge boom of that happen through the pandemic, and it seems like that's something that's here to stay, that it's only growing, that, you know, consumption is increasing. And delivery service, this last mile delivery that's largely happening on two-wheelers or three-wheelers within cities is increasing vehicle use in the cities. And so this is another area that we must consider for electric transition as we move forward. I will stop with that. Thank you very much for organizing such a great webinar.
Hi everyone. I just want to request everyone to just switch on their video cam for one last snapshot, a group photo, so virtual.
And thank you everyone, and thank you everyone for making this such a wonderful event for all of us. And thank you, Vinuta Di, for wrapping this up so beautifully. I don't have to wrap up, just my final thank yous to all of you. This was extremely fulfilling, and it's a Friday just after lunch. I want to thank all the participants also who've been very patient. And I'm sorry we couldn't take comments and questions from others, but this is just the start for many great discussions to happen and for our cities to become more livable, which is all a dream that we all commonly share. So thank you very much. And I don't know who's taking the photo, and let us know when we need to smile.
Say cycle.
Okay, that's better.
One more. Yeah, we have got it.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and look forward to being in touch again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.